Hello and welcome back. Just posted my best books of 2025, so now it is time to post my worst books of 2025. And I know there's a lot of discourse surrounding if we should be posting worst books and things of that nature, but I think it's important to share our opinions, to disagree, and just because I didn't like something doesn't mean that you won't like something. And a couple of these books on the list are more like disappointments rather than like this is the worst thing I've ever read. So I just want to put the disclaimer out there that just because these books didn't work for me doesn't mean they might not work for you. And I hope that people do enjoy these books. They just weren't for me. There's no particular order that I'm going to do for this video other than my number one, which is like hands down my least favorite that I read this year. So without further ado, let's jump in. The first book I want to talk about, I already kind of talked about at length in one of my wrap up videos, and this is the book that I'm probably most disappointed by out of the entire year. That book is Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. This book, the first quarter of it, I actually really quite enjoyed. Like, I enjoyed watching the characters like go on their first date, the setup like at the veterinarian clinic, all those sorts of things. This book does follow our main female gal as she brings in a kitten to the vet, and the vet at this clinic is the male love interest, and he tells her it would be best for her to put like the cat down, and she said no way, watch me raise money to get surgery for this cat. And that's what she did. So like it was a funny quirky little start to the book. I really enjoyed their first date and everything, but as the book progressed I found myself getting more and more frustrated, not only with the choices of the main characters, but the dynamic between the two. Like, I couldn't see past the physical attraction to them, and like the guy was so down bad that he was willing to put aside anything to make this girl happy. And honestly, she had so much going on in her life because the whole premise of the book is that her mother is having dementia and experiencing that at a younger age than is typically normal. So there was just a lot of different like external factors at play, and it just made it really hard to root for this couple when there's so much against them. I also just didn't get it cuz like the girl was not that funny, not that interesting, and this dude was so bad for her. Like, you can only make so many jokes about mustard before I want to claw my eyes out because that was like her job was to work for a mustard marketing team or something. And like she was not that funny, but this dude, anything that came out of this girl's mouth, he's like, "Oh my god, she's so funny." Ugh. The other thing that like really bothered me about this book is that there was a lack of description among characters. Specifically, the most heinous was with our male main character Xavier. He was just constantly compared to rice sand, and it's like when I'm reading a book, I don't want that image put in my head. I want to create my own image because like what do you do if someone doesn't think rice sand is gorgeous and amazing? Then they're not going to root for the love interest, or I want to have that level of creativity where I get to control what the character looks like. And I think that's just lazy writing on Abby Jimenez's part. It'd be different if you described what he looked like and then some characters drew the comparison, but if that is the initial way you're going to describe this man, like, come on, you know? So that just really bothered me, and as the story progressed, I lost interest very quickly in rooting for these characters, which I'm really upset about. Next book I want to talk about is another book that I had a frustrating time with, and this book was one of my most anticipated. It was All Better Now by Neil Shusterman. I love Neil Shusterman so much. If you can't see right here are the two books in the Scythe series because I love them so much. They're fully annotated. I've read both of them twice. I love his writing style. I love the way that he crafts interesting worlds based on like psychology and philosophical questions. Like, Scythe World is like, what if nobody ever died anymore, And All Better Now's premise is what if there was a pandemic that just made you so happy all the time? Like, you didn't have to think about the bad things, you just wanted to help other people, and how that kindness comes with a fault. So it sounds really interesting. But I think what lost me in this story is I did not care about any of the characters. Like, there was one character I found interesting in this entire book, and it's just because she was a calculating, manipulative queen, which, and she's a little unhinged. I think I have a thing for unhinged female characters, so that's why I found her interesting. But the other two characters, one, I just like could not empathize with him whatsoever, like I don't even remember their names. And usually I remember names. I remember the name of the girl I liked. It was Morgan. But I don't remember the other characters. And then there was this girl that was just like a plastic bag floating through the wind, just getting whipped around by whatever the guy wanted to do, basically. It was not as interesting as I hoped. And this book was chunky. This book was like over 500 pages. And I just could not get behind a lot of the things. I think it asked some interesting questions, specifically about like the autonomy behind like pandemic certain situations, like if someone's not careful, then how do other people feel about that? Like it talks about that in a really interesting way, and how sickness can be used as a weapon. Those sorts of interesting questions came up, but I just don't think that this book was well paced, and the characters were really hard for me to grasp onto. There is a second book coming out, and part of me is just curious enough to know how it's going to end, but we'll see what the reviews are before I jump into that. Next on the list is a book that I read for my horror book club, and this book is called Youth Juice by E.K. Sathu, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, but this book is a worse version of Natural Beauty in my mind, but I think I read the two too closely together as well. But it was really hard for me to engage with this story. So the premise is that there's like this beauty industry and they're taking advantage of young girls. Like a lot of people say it's like the devil meets Prada, sort of vibe. And our main character is just the most unlikable person ever. And I love an unlikable character, but like she wasn't trying to be unlikable, is how I read it. So she's working for this like corporation, beauty corporation, and she is getting like all these perks and things and trying out these new like facial cream products, those sorts of things. And people in her life are starting to treat her differently because of her work with this company, but there's like some violence attached to it, and I can't even describe to you what else really happens in this book because I was just so apathetic to the story in general. Similar to like All Better Now, it could ask a lot of interesting questions like commentary in the beauty industry, especially young women trying to get into the beauty industry, and then what the beauty industry does to contort and mess with youth. So there's a lot of like interesting questions in here. I just think that this particular approach to it fumbled the bag. And if you're going to read a story that kind of talks about that, I would recommend Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang a million times more than this book here, which I'm sad about because I wanted to draw comparisons between the two, but this one just, I couldn't focus enough to do it. Next book on the list has just made me rage in my own brain time and time again, and that's how I know I had to eventually put it on the worst books. Not like it's not the worst written thing I've ever read, but just the concepts are really frustrating here. This book is Generations by Jean M. Twenge, and this is a social psychologist woman with a PhD who's talked about like Gen Z and iPhone usage and everything in previous books, but in this book, she's focusing on the differences between like the silence boomers, millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, and what she referred to as the polars, because this book was written before the term Generation Alpha was coined. So I think this book came out in 2023. So it's still relatively new and still talks about like the after effects of like the COVID-19 pandemic and things like that. Um, the historical aspects of this book were really interesting. Like I learned a lot of things I didn't know about like the politics and like social climate of certain times, like especially the silence boomers and Gen X. Like I didn't know much about that at all, but you can definitely tell that this author had a bias going into the book, because if you read the millennial chapters and the Gen Z chapters, you can just tell that there's like an underlying layer of malice towards them that's like trying to disguise itself as objectivity, and that's not the case. Like I think a lot of her data was cherry picked to back the claims, specifically in the millennial and Gen Z chapters. And I can say this because one of the things that she talked about in the millennial chapter was she said that they're actually not as bad off as you think. Like, here's how much money they're making, and here's this. But like her data, specifically starting like from the collapse of the economy in 2008 to now, was only focusing on individuals who had a college degree, and then it didn't even break down like the differences in college degrees and how much money that would equate, as well as she didn't question like inflation at all, and it definitely was obvious in like the data that elder millennials were having an easier time than younger millennials, because like me and my brother were on like the cusp essentially. So like I was born like closer to, you know, the end of the millennial era than like the end of the Gen Z era, but I'm still Gen Z, you know? So it was just really frustrating to read, because it's like, what reality are you living in? Like, people, a whole generation of people wouldn't make this up. Like, there was just lack of sympathy towards these people almost too. And like, I get it, if you're trying to write this book objectively but you still bias, there's just, this book had a lot of problems, and I am angry and angrier the more I think about them. I filled up like 4 pages of my journaling notebook with all of my notes from this book because I found it really interesting. Like, I still physically read this entire book, and it was like 500 plus pages. Like, why do I do this to myself? So, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like, I wouldn't like not recommend it to people, but also like go in knowing that there is some bias that obviously seeps through. I don't know. I'm going to be thinking about this book a lot though, which I kind of hate, but whatever. Next book on the list is the only sequel that made this list, and it was the final book in a young adult duology, which I don't know how this is a young adult duology, frankly. This is Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli. I read Heartless Hunter at the beginning of the year for one of my book clubs, and I actually had a wonderful time with it. It was really fun, but I don't think it was like the best, well, like best written thing I'd ever read, but I was like, can't deny I had a good time. So I went in with pretty positive feelings to Rebel Witch. Like, my expectations were low. The execution and delivery was even lower. The quote unquote plot twist of this book was the most like predictable thing in a romantasy you could have ever imagined. I also did not enjoy like the vibes of this book. Just the way that the plot set it up did not match the intensity or like plot structure at all that came from the first book. Like, it just felt like they were trying to string in a bunch of tropes together, that they're like, oh, let's do the forced proximity, oh, let's do you know, one only one bed, let's throw in this trope. It was like, how many tropes can we put in this story in order to make it engaging? And I could not tell you anything else that was interesting about this book. This book was a waste of my time, and I'm sad about it, truthfully. The next 2 books I'm going to lump into one category because it was from the same author. So the author in question is Catherine Center, and the 2 books are The Rom-Commers and Hello Stranger. I read The Bodyguard by this author and gave it 3.5 stars. I thought it was good. It was the first one I had read of her catalog, so I was like, okay, I this one wasn't amazing, but I was like, but I will try some other books. Oh, these just went downhill. These just went downhill. The rom-commers is like 2 people that, you know, don't get along with each other, have to write like a rom-com script, and it's this dude that writes a really poor script, and then a girl who loves rom-coms that comes and tries to help him. When I tell you this is the most insufferable man I've ever read about, it's true. Like, I don't like love interests who are just mean for no reason to the main character, and she did not deserve that at all. It was frustrating to say the least. And then Hello Stranger had 2 characters, and like one girl is like a portrait artist, and she gets about a facial blindness, but she is like the dumbest main character. Like, and I thought Rune from Heartless Hunter was the dumbest like FMC I'd ever read. No, this girl takes the cake. I don't even remember her name because I don't care. That's the other problem. And I remember characters' names. If I love a book, I could tell you. But she just, it was one of those frustrating things where like, you cannot tell me that this character would not recognize her love interest's voice multiple times over again. Like, there were just, you just have to suspend your disbelief so much for this book even to make sense and to enjoy it. And if you can do that, that's great. I could not. So these 2 books just were boring, missed the mark for me. With that being said, I don't know if I'll read any more of Catherine Center's books. Like I know she's got two more that are like one is out and one is coming out, but like these two just left a sour taste in my mouth. And then the first one I'd read, The Bodyguard, was fine. It was good, solid even, but like I don't think about it on a daily basis, you know? So I don't know if I just don't think her writing style is for me. So do with that what you will. And the last book on this list is by far my least favorite thing I read this year, which makes me so sad because I actually had it on my list of like 25 books to read in 2025. My least favorite book of 2025 was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. If you're telling me that this book is as hyped up as it is, I genuinely want to know your opinion why you think this is like a really great thriller and like why it's great. This won the thriller category for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I'm struggling to see why. This book was way too slow, and like I get it. If they're trying to methodically set up things to later come to a head, I understand that. But this writing had nothing keeping me engaged and wanting to continue with the story. And if I'm able to pick out what the plot twist is going to be, and I'm not even a thriller reader, and I was able to pick it out like not even 2/3 of the way into the book, then what are we doing? You know, like this book follows characters that go to this like summer camp, and then one of the girls, Barbara, is like a daughter of a really rich family, and like there's a lot of complicated history with the family because they lost their son at this camp, and then Barbara goes missing, and there's like this big mystery surrounding it, and like we're following a few different perspectives, which was one thing that I did really like about the story is the perspectives felt very unique from one another. Like we have camp counselor, we have like someone in Barbara's family, and then we have Barbara's perspective. So like I liked the different perspectives. It felt very distinct. I just think all of them felt way too slow, and there wasn't enough to keep me engaged and invested in the characters. I wish that I liked this book, but it was one of those things where I put the speed of the audiobook on so quickly so I could just get through and find out what happened and call it a day after that. Like, I am very, very upset that I didn't like this book as much as I thought I was going to. Yeah, I wanted to like go to the woods. I really did. And especially since it's so popular, it is so unbelievably popular. But I guess I'm one of those people who is not in the majority on this one. Those were my worst books of 2025. Overall, I had a pretty solid reading year. Like most of these books would have gotten like a 2 star. God of the Woods kind of tipping towards a 1. If you liked these books, please tell me why in the comments because I always want to know why someone liked a book that I didn't. And then maybe like it'll make me realize I missed something or I didn't engage as fully as I should have with certain topics that were brought up. Like I love having those kinds of discussions and things. And like I never want to yuck anyone's yum because like objectively I don't think any of these books were bad books, they just weren't right for me. If you haven't watched my best books of 2025 video, you should totally do that, as well as subscribe and join me in the year of 2026 to the channel. I'm really excited to see what this year brings. It's going to be a good one of reading, but it's also going to be a busy one just in general. But I would love to have you join me for the whole journey. I don't have anything else to add, but thank you for spending some time, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!